want to.
Thank you.
Alrighty. And then the other thing that I would like you to pick up, somehow we'll probably bring to you as we go through and we talk. It's going to be close to the end of the lecture when we're actually going to need that. All right. So fats, and the reason I want to do some meats is because even nowadays with all the information that we have available, right? Because what's the first thing we do? We go on the phone, we go online and check. If not, we ask a son or a daughter, they'll check for us. What do we do first? So it's there. And even with all that information up there, I see more than 50% of clients coming to the clinic still getting hung up on 4 major meats when it comes to fats. So I chose those 4. We're going to go through them, we'll break them down, and hopefully you have a little bit of a lesson there on why us at IGN Nutrition, generally speaking, approach them a certain way. All right? So first, and the major one, fat will make you fat. Is that true or is not? True, yes, false?
False.
It's yes and yes. This is the tricky part. It's yes and yes. What did I do? Sorry. What's not true is this is not supposed to be out there. Eat a low-fat diet. And I'm not saying grandma is talking about this. I'm saying doctors and so on, they still recommend a low-fat diet. So what people do, they go for a 0% milk or yogurt or ice creams because there's no fat in there, so let's go for it. But what that does to our body, we're going to see on the next slide, 2 different images, right? I hope it's clear enough so you can understand the difference, right? They're both obese. I chose male for a specific reason. They're both obese, but you see there's a different type of fat in either one, all right? So on the left side, we have a European male, and on the left side, we have a North American male. I don't necessarily want to put a blanket overall, but it's pretty much what's happening in the world. So what's happening in Europe is a high consumption of fat, especially animal fat, and low carbohydrates. As opposed to North America, we go highly on carbohydrates, especially simple carbohydrates, and low on fat because that's what everybody recommends, go low on fat, right? So you're going to get majority of the calories from fat in a European diet, let's call it like that. In a North American diet, you get majority of calories from sugar. Now, because we need fat, either way, the body's going to convert this sugar into fat to use it for some functions. The extra calorie from sugars are getting to get stored in the subcutaneous level. So it becomes a subcutaneous fat. Where in the other case, high animal fats, all that extra calories are ended up around the internal organs. It's called visceral fat. So you see how you can actually clearly see the difference. Where the one is going inside the organs, it expands everything towards the outside, that's why the skin is stretched. Where here everything is under the skin and it's loosey-loose. This is sugar, that's high animal fat. So the answer to the first question, can fat make you fat? Yes. Can low fat make you fat? Yes. So the truth is somewhere in the middle, what type of fat? And we're going to go through and we'll see what. All right? So you get high calories from either one, they will get stored. Right? For 2 reasons. It's too much calorie, the body will, because if you eat too much, the body gets a signal, hey, I'm probably going to be starving for the next few weeks, so why not store those extra calories? That's why the guys give it to me. That's what the bear does, right? They eat a lot, they store the calories, and they burn them over the winter. So eating a low-fat diet, as we saw in the second image, the North American style, is detrimental, right? Because sugar is going to be converted into a saturated fats. Why? We need the fats for important functions in the body. It's not coming in a diet, the body's going to make it. Unfortunately, cannot make essential fats, which are important for us. It's going to make saturated fats, maybe some mono, and that's about it. And that's what we're going to use. So why do we actually need the fat? Why shouldn't we go on a low-calorie diet? All right? Those are just high-level functions in a body, and they're extremely important, right? Energy production, straightforward, very clear. Metabolism, in order to break down and absorb fats, we need fats. We need biolipase, they're all fats. We need to transport them by using fatty acids. Same thing, right? So you don't have the right ones, they won't even be absorbed even if you put the right one in. It's gonna take a while for that to happen. Skin cell division, growth, prostaglandins, basically pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, that's you need to know about this. Brain development, about 60% of the brain is comprised, the nervous system comprised of fats. If you don't have the right ones, the connections are not happening, you don't think that fast, you might even end up with nervous system issues. Alzheimer's disease is pretty much a low-fat diet over 60 years. That's my conclusion, and doesn't have to be a blanket overall, but that's pretty much what's happening. Oxygen transfer, and the one that I love the most is membrane component. As we go through is the one that I will stop by the most, and I will show you how we break it down and why it's so important to me and how I assess it, why I correct that first, because it's important for the overall health, right? So membrane component of every single cell in the body, including the organelles inside the cells, all right? So we're clear that we need to eat fat. What type of fat, all right? Unsaturated, everybody will say, we have to eat a lot of unsaturated. Saturated fat is bad for you. Is this true or false? Glad to hear that. Probably all seen this. I love it. All right, so it's in a type of fat, all right? It's not one single category that will end up in a wrong result in your body, right? So let's break them down, and we'll look at some of the chemical structures of the saturated fats. This comes from Udo's book. It is available in our store here. And if you want to learn more about fats, it's not a very well-written book in terms of, how can I say, following the information as you go along is more of a technical book. You kind of have to skip between pages, but it's a good book with a lot of good information that's pretty much repeated even nowadays. So what's happening there, those are all saturated fats. But we do have shorter saturated fats and longer saturated fats, right? Depending on which scale are they on, they will tend to go towards different functions or other functions, all right? That's pretty much what you need to know by now. So here we're gonna look at some of the functions that I mentioned about. Those are saturated fats, not only fats, generally speaking, right? Preferred fuel for the heart. So here goes the low-fat diet for your heart health. No fat, you actually don't have the right fuel for the heart. It is glucose, but it's mainly needed, but because it runs non-stop and because the level of glucose goes up and down in the body, it will end up using fats as a secondary, maybe 10 to 20 times a day at least, right? So it will run through the saturated fats, and I'm talking about the short ones, right? It helps in modulating the genetic code, prevents cancer. That's butyric acid, comes from butter. If you don't eat butter, you'll start eating now. Antiviral agents, all right? If you want to help your immune system, this is going to be one of them. You probably all heard that coconut oil is good for your immune system. If you didn't, you probably hear now. Caprylic oil is high in coconut oil. Anti-caries, anti-plaque, antifungal, lauric acid, all right? It's another oil present. And then we have palmitic and stearic acid. They might have some effects in reducing the cholesterol, right? So studies that are looking at fat connections with heart disease and high cholesterol, I choose just two, the high levels, the most significant ones. What they don't do, and this is the mistake, they don't look at differentiating between saturated fats and trans fats. Everybody heard of trans fats? You know what they are? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, so once you do the differentiation, you'll see the majority of studies actually are based that connect high fat with heart disease are coming from this type of fats and not necessarily from saturated fats. All right, so let's see what's a trans fat. Up top, we have a saturated fatty acid. And when it says saturated, actually, it doesn't have any gaps where it can accept any other molecules. Where the other end, the unsaturated fat, has gaps, can accept extra molecules. Now, trans fats are usually processed unsaturated fats. So applying high heat to those fats to make them more stable for the shelf life, instead of having the hydrogens, as you see, on the same side of the, on the same side of the carbons, because you want those to bend where those double bonds are happening. Instead of being on the same side, the trans fats go on opposite sides. So what will that do? It will make an unsaturated fat which bends into a saturated fat looking type of fat. So you start with unsaturated fats. They recommend eat unsaturated fats. And you go and buy the canola oil by gallon. And that sort of has trans fats which act like saturated fats. So when the body doesn't have what it needs, it will use whatever's available. And it will start using those guys. A little bit more of a complicated chart. The other thing that I want to pinpoint to you here is, so we start with saturated fats, we end up with super unsaturated fats. And you see one thing that changes is the melting point, right? High melting point here. And when it says melting point, basically becomes solid at room temperature if you want to think like that. Very high, so it's solid. Much less, but then when they become trans fats, they increase the melting point. One way of looking at that, without doing any science research, if you take some butter on your fingers, it basically melts down and disappears, because we have about 25, close to 30 degrees at the extremities on our fingers, and you melt that down. Same with coconut oil, right? How about chicken fat? You eat chicken wings, what's happening with that? It's like super glue, it sticks your fingers up. Because they're saturated fat, they need a higher temperature to melt down. So if we don't melt it down here, obviously it's not going to be liquefied inside the body too. There'll be very, very solid fats going to the body. And I'm not saying not eating chicken, just give you a comparison so you understand what's actually happening food-wise inside the body, right? If our temperature from the outside won't melt it down, it's not going to happen with 2 degrees difference inside, right? So that's the other thing that is good to keep in mind here. This is minus, right? Everybody has flaxseed oil home? Where do you keep it? Fridge, freezer. Even if you put it in a freezer, it'll stay liquid. Semi-gooey, but it's liquid, right? Because it's a super unsaturated fat that needs a very low melting point. That's just a side note. All right? So now, why do we need those tails, right? Let's go back 1 second. So, one more. This is where we have the acid end, and this is where we have the fatty part. This is why they're called fatty acids. So now, those so-called phospholipids they contain 2 of those chains. And it's basically what I just showed you in the first slide, a saturated fat, the one that's straight, and an unsaturated fat, the one that bends. And depends on how many double bonds it has, it will bend more or less. Why do we need those? So those phospholipids will build the membrane of every single cell. As I said, we're going to end up talking about the membrane. It's one of my favorite, and I'll show you why. So those phospholipids will build the membrane of each cell. Now, one is good for stability. You need to have that, right? We have the walls to keep everything up and running, but you also need some functionality. This is why we have windows. Otherwise, it would be just walls in here and put a light on, and it's fine. It's not as efficient, right? You burn electricity, You put the windows up, you don't need to burn electricity. This is why, in theory, the body has one-on-one on each of those small components of cell membrane, which are called phospholipids. So now, to break down a cell membrane and understand where those fats are coming into play, those phospholipids that we talked about, right? Some of them have saturated, but some of them have saturated with unsaturated fats. Because in the same membrane, we have proteins as well, and we have other components there as well. But we need to close the gap so the membrane becomes as enclosed as possible, right? So imagine that this is going to be a saturated fat. This is going to have a little bit of permeability. So what the body automatically does in that case is going to add some cholesterol to block the hole. That's good and bad, depends on what you want to do. If you have a lot of toxins in the body, that's good that you put cholesterol in, so you block those toxins from coming inside the cell. But if you have a lot of nutrients that need to go inside the cell, by doing that, permeability of the membrane is not that good. So it depends on what you need to do there. More of an overall image of the same thing, right? So we're talking about a membrane of a cell with phospholipids. We have cholesterol. We have proteins. Those proteins act as sensors. They act as channel of transmission. They act as structures sometimes. They have many functions. They're very, very important. But in order for that membrane to be integral, the fats are extremely important here because they need to enclose every single gap. The other function that they have is the head, the phosphorus part of it, likes water. The fat part obviously doesn't like water. This is how we keep everything inside the cell, outside the cell, and the communication only happens through certain channels. So now, another way of looking at it, right? We have the cell, this is a cell, regular cell, right? We have the cell membrane. We have the cytosol or the plasma inside, and then we have the nucleus. Which one of these three components do you think is the brain of the cell? The CEO. Nucleus, 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 nucleus. Anybody else? Any other idea? You heard it somewhere else, I guess. So nucleus is the genitalius, just used to reproduce, nothing else. Membrane is the brain. That's for me from a nutritional perspective. Why? Membrane is going to be the one to say, you stay out, you go out, you come in, you stay in. Membrane is going to be the one that's going to keep the cell happy with the nutrients that it needs, and it's going to keep it away from nutrients that are not supposed to go inside the cell. All right? Membrane is going to decide what's happening with our bodies. And each individual cell is going to, right, obviously have the same decision. This is why we're healthy or sick, based on individual single cell. Why is this important? I mean, why are the fats important? Because they're part of that membrane that actually is the brain of our single cell. We talked about the brain, our actually brain nervous system having about 60% of fat. Same in here. Every single cell membrane of our body has somewhere between 60 to 80% fat. Extremely important. Going low on fat is just crazy. Choosing the right fats is the good idea. How do you do that? Probably a little bit more complicated, but that's the whole idea, right? So for me, when it comes to clinical practice, this is the first thing that I look at. This is the first thing I work with. Because without that communication, regardless whether I change the diet from a high sugar content or low sugar content for a diabetic client, if it doesn't have the right fats, it's not going to work. It's not going to absorb. And we've seen it many times, right? By now, all the clients that have diabetes, they know what to eat. They change their diet because it's so important. They do it. Still doesn't work. They don't get motivated. It's the fat. The membrane is not in a right structure. It becomes a little bit more complicated when you try to change that structure because they compete for the enzyme. It's a little bit more complicated. This is why you work with a practitioner that knows what's going on and how to approach it and where to go with it. But that's the trick, all right? Changing the level of glucose that comes in the blood won't do much. You need to pass this barrier. How do you do that? One of the techniques that I use in a clinic is live blood analysis. You probably heard about it. Edith is doing it up front every single time we have an open house. So if you haven't done it, it's a good chance to do it here. Price is actually extremely good. And you get an insight of what's happening with your body. I ask my clients if it's nothing extremely urgent or nothing off to come twice a year just to keep it in check, because this is more preventative than anything. So I just want to show you some images and we'll look at all of them, right? Number one is relatively healthy. There are only a few cells that have a little bit of damage in the membrane. Let me see if I can use the arrow. Yeah, it's coming. All right, so something like this. But majority of the cells are nice and round and separated, and this is what we are looking for. In this case, all this damage done to the membrane, it's clear there's damage to the membrane, right? There's no science, no super fancy science behind it. But all that damage, and that I found out later, solving the problem and seeing the before and after picture, it was high level of sugar and dairy from Tim Hortons coffee. I'm talking about 6-7 coffees a day. This is what it did to the cell membrane. So you remember those guys? The yellow circles? Where are they? Oligosaccharides? Those are sugars. So you mess up with the type of sugars, you don't have the sensors on the membrane. And then you end up with an effect like this that eventually will change the fat content as well. That's not going to be healthy either. In this case, not very clear. I think the light and the focus is a bit off. But what's happening there is free radical damage and parasites damage the cell membrane. And what they do, they monitor the protein to go inside. When it comes to parasites, free radicals will actually damage the fat content of the membrane, right? And it changes the structure. And in this case, it's major dysbiosis. Everybody familiar with dysbiosis? No? In a large colon, we have good and bad bacteria, and it has to be in the right balance for us to be healthy. When that balance is towards more of the bad and less of the good, the level of toxins the bad bacteria are producing have to go to the liver to be detoxified. By the time we poo, especially if you poo once every 3-4 days, so those toxins have to be detoxified. On their way to the liver, it uses blood to travel, and then they damage the red blood cells and this type of formation. I call them jigsaw puzzle. Some of the clients call them popcorn. And then when I say, wait a minute, why was the first thing that came to your mind popcorn? All right, so you get a clue about the diet, although they didn't mention it in the intake. Anyhow, once again, this is why if you don't work with the membrane first, and this is just one tissue, the blood, if this looks like this, what are the chances the other ones are better, all right? And especially like in this case, I'm always going to see issues on the skin every single time. Some of them here where the bacteria is present, but when it comes to dysbiosis, always going to be issues on the skin. I'll just make a small parenthesis, nothing to do with this, to get an idea why. In order for us to detoxify, we use 4 organs. 5 are the most important, right? We use the lungs, we use the kidneys, we use the large colon, and we use the skin. Majority of the toxins would come out the rear end, the large colon. Some to the kidneys, they have to be water soluble, obviously. But when the colon doesn't work, and then obviously the lungs is gaseous forms, not so much will go out there. So the large colon will take the majority of the work. When that's not happening properly, you have dysbiosis, the bacteria is not balanced properly, the toxins are not going to go out the way you need to or the way the body needs to. So the skin will take that role, because the skin can detoxify fat-soluble toxins, so the skin will take that role. That's why I said when I see a colon being impaired associated with skin issues, so just a no-brainer that you have to work with the right bacteria in there, right? And you fix the membrane at the same time. So saturated fat, we need them. It's part of the membrane. We need the unsaturated as well, and we're going to talk about those as well, but we need the saturated fat. It has to be the right ones, not necessarily the long chain ones. It's medium to short chains that we actually use, because some of those will be used as an energy as well. But we need those for the cell membrane. That cell membrane has to be healthy. Another one that I still here at the clinic, it's definitely more than 50% of clients that are filling up the intake with still on a cholesterol medication. And I usually ask, just for fun, when did it start? What did they put you on? What's happening? Why are you still on the medication and all that stuff? And it's always almost for no reason. It's like, oh, well, they say it's safer, and why not? Let's be on it. The trick with cholesterol, from my perspective, it's simple to approach. It takes a longer time and harder to actually correct it, but it depends what the function is. But it's easy to approach. It has nothing to do with the dietary cholesterol, and I'll show you why. We make inside the body about 85% of cholesterol. It's not a clear cut, but it's a good idea of how we make it, right? So the body produces that from fats. About 15% comes from actually diet. So you reduce this in a diet. If the body needs it, it's gonna produce more. You put more in a diet, the body's gonna produce less if it needs high level of cholesterol. Now, here's the trick. Why do you need high level of cholesterol in the blood? All right? Because when they travel, they catch you in a blood test and they say you have high level of cholesterol. Why? Very simple. 7 reasons. Those are the 7 major functional cholesterol, right? Membrane component. One example there to get an idea why do we need that. We talked about the high level of toxins in the body. Majority of the toxins, just to get an idea, we have cells, right? This space in between the cells is called extracellular fluid. So intracellular fluid inside the cell and extracellular fluid. There are only a few major fluids in the body. We have the blood, we have the lymph, we have the intracellular fluid, the one inside the cell, and extracellular fluid. The extracellular fluid is the one that has the less control overall. Less control of pH, less control of detoxification, less control of everything. So that is the garage that we dump stuff in. All right? Who has a clean garage here? No hands up, right? That's what, put in a garage, we'll deal with it later. This is what the body does with toxins. It puts them into the extracellular fluid. So when this is toxic, let's do it this way. Right? What is the brain of the cell gonna say? Make me less permeable, right? Because I don't want stuff to get in. I want to be extremely rigid, right? It's like, put more guys at the border. I want to make sure what goes in and what goes out. So high level of toxins in the body's going to produce more cholesterol to fill those holes. You don't have the unsaturated fats to fill the holes, the cholesterol will do it. You remember we talked about it, right? Check that. Do a detoxification, see whether your level of cholesterol drop. So do a test before, do a detox, see if they drop. They don't have to drop so they take you off medication, but it'll give you an idea. Hey, it worked, that must be one of it. Let's work more at the detox, all right? Tell the doctor what it is, work along with them, and if they see the numbers they like, they will take you off the medication. So that's one. Steroid hormones, estrogen, testosterone, this goes up and down, depends on the lifestyle and depends on the age and so on, right? That's another reason. Check to see your hormonal levels. Aldosterone, cortisol, right? If you have high level of stress, you're surprised you have high cholesterol? No, the body needs to make the hormones. Cholesterol is going to be the brick to build those hormones, right? Check those up, reduce the stress. You'll check the cholesterol level will drop, right? And now keep in mind that it's not always just one. It's usually 2 or 3 of those. Oh boy. Production of vitamin D. Especially over the winter, right? If the levels are going, it depends on if you get tested 2-3 times a year just because you're crazy about the cholesterol levels and you see it kind of goes up and down, you associate with the vitamin D, why not increase the level of vitamin D? It will drop the cholesterol levels, not significantly, but enough for you to help eventually get off of it. Bile acids, right? In order to break down fats, the body has to produce bile. Skin protection, same thing, Like here we have more cholesterol in a cell membrane, right, on the skin than any other tissue in the body. It cannot be so permeable, right? It has to be a little bit more rigid than any other tissue. And here's another crazy one. It acts as an antioxidant. You have a lot of free radicals in the body. Body's producing cholesterol because it needs antioxidants. Why? Well, I'm not taking vitamin C, vitamin E, being a fat-soluble vitamin. I'm not breaking it down because I don't have the right fats to break it down. Not so much of those nutrients in the foods that I eat because everything is super mega cooked or is fast food. And obviously you don't have antioxidants to break down. The body can make one. Cholesterol is going to make it to help this up. Do you understand how I approach this? Do you like this approach? Figure out what's the function, fix that function, and it's going to work. Otherwise, if you chase level of cholesterol with tinctures and other stuff, it's just going to put a patch. A year later, you come back. I have many clients coming in and, I tried this for like 10 years, nothing works. Did you try this? Oh, that looks interesting. Right, so you start approaching it. But it's very simple to approach. Hard to do it because you have to figure out which one it is. And you have to work with the client. They have to do a blood test to make sure it kind of goes in the right direction, in the direction that you want. All right, so we're clear with cholesterol. If you suspect any levels of cholesterol, or you have it in a family and you think it might be a little genetic, this is what you do. This is high level. It's for life. It's maintenance. But this is what you can do. And if you actually break it down, you'll see that you approach one of those functions that we talked about, right? The first one, obviously, if you do antioxidants, you're going to make sure that the body doesn't produce high level of cholesterol because it needs antioxidants, right? The thing with eggs, right? Sunny side egg. When you eat those eggs, they have lecithin. That lecithin acts as an emulsifier of fats. So you need to keep those fats as soluble as possible to be able to travel in the body so they can change function and so on, whatever functions they need to be doing there, right? So lecithin is one of them. I do eat a lot of eggs, but I also have granules of lecithin. They come from soy, so non-GMO. The level of lecithin in that soy, it's so insignificant that even if you just do a regular type of soy or even from sunflower seeds, lecithin, is still good. 1/3 of brain, we talked about the fat, right? One third is just the brain. It's made of lecithin, all right? So if you have an exam or you have any stressful situation, to help the nervous system, this is what you do. You increase the level of lecithins for the day or two, you'll be fine, right? The brain will function properly.
How many eggs?
How many eggs do I eat? About 4 a day. That's too high, right? Every day, no, I have 5 days a week. Yeah.
And how do you cook them? You boil them? Or?
Sunny side, boiled, omelette, French toast, homemade bread, French toast. I eat everything that's on earth. I don't think I look strange. I think I'm doing okay. Seriously, I eat everything that's on earth. And I have friends from Vietnam to US to Canada to Europe to Japan, like everywhere. And I tried every single tradition. I traveled everywhere and I've seen and I looked at all those things. Every single culture, without looking at nutrition, they eat a lot of fat. Talking about the Vietnamese, heavy duty broth-based fatty soups and lots of pork and so on. Do they look strange? No, some of them, because they eat too many calories, like the European. That's the only thing. They eat too much of it. Otherwise, it's not a problem. Eating those, the essential fatty acids, are the ones that bend, right? So if the body needs to make cholesterol for that membrane to close the gap, by putting the right fats in, the body's going to produce less cholesterol. So that's going to be one of the other ways to do it. Address the endocrine glands. We're talking about the hormones that the body has to produce from cholesterol. Address that, you should be fine. If you do a detoxification, it's going to do the same thing, right? You're going to take some of the junk out of here. The body doesn't have to produce so much to keep everything in check. All right. How many of you supplement with EPA, DHA a day? Yes, 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 yes. For how long have you done it daily?
4 months.
Okay. Anybody longer than that?
About 4 years.
That's pretty much what I hear in the clinic. Do they help? Do they work?
They work for me.
All right. Do you have them from a food source, or you just supplement because you don't want to have anything food source wise?
Well, I supplement because I don't understand where it comes from.
Okay. 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 That makes sense. Okay. So one thing is clear. Are they essential? Do we need to supplement with those, EPA and DHA? I hear yes or no.
Yes.
Yes? Is it yes or no? Are the EPA and DHA essential or no?
They're essential but not necessarily from supplements.
Correct. That is not necessarily from supplements. Incorrect. They're not essential. EPA and DHA are derivatives of omega-3. And alpha-linolenic acid, omega-3, and linoleic acid, omega-6, are parental oils. Those are essential. This is what the body cannot make. If you give the body those two oils, it will make everything else on this chart, including EPA and DHA. So now I'm asking again, is EPA, DHA essential? Following this logic, right? You give the body what it needs, it'll break them down and make what it needs. Now, why do we push EPA and DHA? Because in order to make those conversions, we need enzymes. They compete, those enzymes. They're made out of protein. Protein levels are not so high. They also compete with the trans fats to break down trans fats because we have too much of it. So this is why we want to bypass the conversion and go for the products. But they're not essential. I just wanted to understand the concept. We need the parental oils. Those are essential. We cannot make them. Omega-6 and omega-3, you remember the unsaturated fat that I showed you with 3 double bonds carbon? That's basically on omega-3. So should that be just 1 double bond carbon? That's omega-9, which body can make from a saturated fat. So we can insert just 1 double bond from an unsaturated fat to make it a monounsaturated fat, but we cannot insert 2 or 3 bonds. We cannot make omega-6 and 3. That's just so it's kind of clear and you understand. Yes?
So basically, it's not essential to intake it because we can make it.
Which ones?
EPA or DHA. It's
Correct.
essential to intake it. We intake
Correct.
the other things that we make.
Correct. And then we'll go through those and I'll show you what the food sources are.
It's essential to have, but it's not essential to intake.
Smart. Right? So following this logic, EPA and DHA are not essential. Just so you understand when you read an article from now on that they say, well, you have to take because those are essential and so on. No, they're not. Parental oils, yes. Derivatives, not. Why is this important? Why do the body why it just jumps to the EPA and DHA if we need to supplement with those? Why does it need to make all the other ones? Because it uses those. They have so many other functions in the body. And here's the other kicker. From those two, you won't go back. So if you need this, or especially this, as an immune regulator, for instance, how are you going to make it back? This is why I ask, does it work? It worked for me. Okay. Right?
Are you saying that the body will stop producing that if you supplement?
So the question was if the body will stop making a conversion if you supplement. No, it won't. It will balance what it needs. Right? If it needs those, it will make more if you don't have enough from supplementation. If it's too much, it will stop at other sources. It will take different pathways. Just trying to think if we covered everything. So the reason I circle the homogamma-linoleic acid is because it goes in a balance, and I probably should show you the other chart. Yeah, why not? It goes in a balance with the EPA. A little bit more complicated, 2 things I'm going to show you here, it doesn't matter. So EPA and the homogamma with gamma-linoleic acid. See what the conversion is happening here? Anti-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, and then arachidonic acid becomes pro-inflammatory. We need to have those hormone-like substances. Let's say we have a cut. I want to increase the inflammation there. So I have the blood supply and all the stuff to clean the area, but then I want to reduce that inflammation so the tissue cures, all right? So we have pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory. The theory goes that we have so much of this arachidonic acid in the diet that comes from animal foods that the body produces so much pro-inflammatory that those guys are not able to cope and reduce the inflammation. That's where the theory goes. And it's fine. What I want to show you here is when we supplement with this, we're going to stop using majority of the GLA or DGLA. And we need to run that pathway just so the body needs to know how to break it down and to use the proper enzymes. Because you want to have a right balance right there. All right? So let's say you supplement with this a lot. That actually goes more to modulate the immune system than this does. So if you have immune issues, it's probably one of the reasons, because you supplement too much with EPA and you don't let the body do the other derivatives that it needs. The other thing I wanted to show you here are the enzymes that I said the body competes to make the conversion. And if you look under each enzyme, there are some cofactors. They're called cofactors, minerals and vitamins. They help that enzyme for the time being, and then they leave and do other functions, and they come back and help that enzyme. So let's say you don't have B3, B6. Obviously, the conversion is going to be very, very slow. Right? So you have the parental oils, you're not going to convert it. This is just so you understand why the science, not just me, a lot of people said, you know what, forget about the conversion, go to this, because this is what we need, right? Let's say maybe you're low in minerals, maybe you don't have the enzymes. There are many, many reasons for the conversion not to happen. But needless to say, those are not essential, right? The body should be able to make it. So if you want to correct the whole thing and be healthy again, you work with putting back the minerals and vitamins that you need, make sure the body produces enough enzymes, you have the parental oils, and let the body break it down, all right? If you give it already done, then you're not going to have the intermediaries that are actually used for other functions. And those functions are daily functions as well, but also when you need, right? In the spring and autumn, for instance, when the immune system is a little bit more stressed than anything, you need the intermediate oils as well, all right?
That's a question. Where does cod liver oil come from?
Has absolutely nothing to do with the rest, right? So it's the last conversion ever. Just helps the brain.
So if you eat the foods at the top, they'll break down through all the stuff at the bottom?
Correct. And if they don't, then you have to see why and what's missing. Yeah, based on the needs. Mm-hmm. Once again, needless to say, for the short term, this is what I asked for how long. Short term can be 3-4 days. If you have high inflammation, you had a car accident, for instance, take high levels. It will reduce the stress, it will reduce the inflammation, even though nervous system inflammation, that you come, the shock and everything, it will help. Or you can take it about 3-4 months. But if it doesn't do a big change, those fats convert and get absorbed in the body in a matter of minutes, right? If you didn't have EPA and DHA and you have high-level skin condition, psoriasis, and you put those in, and if you don't see a skin change, a change percentage-wise in a skin within a few hours to a day, it's not your solution, right? This is why a lot of people try EPA, DHA for psoriasis, didn't necessarily work. You have to look at other factors, conversion and other things in there. Anyway, so short term, it will definitely help, right? It will repair the cell membrane temporarily. For a permanent change of the cell membrane, it takes, from my perspective, when I'm sitting in the clinic, from 6 to 4 years. From 6 months to 4 years to really correct the cell membrane, to see it on a screen, a live cell analysis. But temporary, to allow some of the communication between inside and outside, it will work, it will go right there, because they compete for position in a cell membrane. Same thing, to bypass any genetic issue with conversion of the enzymes, all right? So those enzymes, to break down, you need the enzymes. Sometimes there can be some genetic issues there where you don't produce one or two of the enzymes, all right? So in order to bypass that, you go for those. And the last point there, so you remember the cell membrane will carry some of the omegas, right? When you need those omegas, either for inflammation or whatever the reason is, the body's going to start breaking down from the cell membrane and is going to put something else in there, right? So in order to stop that, if you catch it, we talked about it, you increase the levels of specifically EPA and DHA. Because those are super unsaturated, the ones that are the most banded. If you remember the image with the saturated ones and the ones the most banded, they will go right into the cell membrane and it's going to do a change in that membrane. Right? Short term. And when I say short term, I say from 3 days to somewhere 3-4 months. If you don't see any change or a major change, or any change of any kind, it's not your solution. It doesn't mean necessarily to stop those. Go for the parental oils. And with those, you'll probably see a big change, and then you'll say, okay, now I have to introduce those in a diet, and that's how I'll go for it. Let's see where this goes. To the parental fatty acids. Some of the things that they do, right? So by introducing those, and we'll talk about which are those, but keep them in mind. So parental oils, you introduce them in a diet that will help you right away with the issues that you see right there. All right, gum bleeding, inflammation, psoriasis, tinnitus, cravings, lactic acid buildup, right? You work on a computer all day long, and you have a lot of lactic acids building up here. Try those oils. They'll break that down. Increase the skin elasticity, and will definitely use your, because they have short chain fatty acids in there as well, so the energy levels will be much, much higher. This is the only thing I have about the ratio. And there's always going to be a question, okay, so how much, if I were to supplement, how much do I supplement, what's the ratio? And here we're talking about ratio not EPA to DHA, but omega-3 to omega-6, or omega-6 to 3, whatever you want to say it. Brain nervous system is 1-to-1, and we have all the studies that actually looked at those, right? Skin, 1,000-to-1, because it doesn't have to be so permeable, right? Organs, about 4-to-1, including the heart. Adipose tissue, 22-to-1. Muscle, about 6.5-to-1. And the reason this is not as high as this is lower is because we use some of those fats as energy directly in the muscle, right? So the more unsaturated you have, the more energy and the better the conversion. So now, what's the best ratio of 6-to-3? It's a very simple answer. Depends on what you approach and what you try to do, right? So now, if you were to do a balance, overall everybody says you should do 3-to-1. Well, if you actually do the math, it's pretty much there. Maybe 4-to-1 to 5-to-1. Personally, I like to go for the 5-to-1 for a long-term, lifelong approach. If you do anything therapeutic, I sometimes even switch the ratio. 3 of the omega-3 and 1 of the omega-6. Just because I want more of that conversion on omega-3. All right. So now just to kind of summarize as much as we can, what are we? Okay, we're good. This is what we should be approaching. So parental oils, and I'll show you how they should be and what type of oils those should be. But another type of oil that should always be in a diet is monounsaturated. As I mentioned to you, the body can make a monounsaturated, but the enzyme from saturated to monounsaturated is the same enzyme that is going to start breaking down the parental oil into derivatives. So why not use the enzyme for the other conversion why should you use it for something that we actually have easily in a diet, right? This is why they recommend, this is why olive oil is a healthy oil, because this is what it should be in a body in a larger amount, a monounsaturated type of fat. And you have some examples there of what type of foods contain high levels of monounsaturated. And then it will be the parental oils. And those oils are vegetarians, right? And they should come from nuts and seeds, depends on what they are. But the most important part, they should be cold pressed. Stored in a cold environment. Doesn't have to be fridge. It's convenient in the fridge because otherwise it's going to be 22, 25 degrees. Not many of us still have the cold room where the ideal temperature is somewhere between 8 and 10 degrees Celsius. I grew up having it at my grandma's house and I just loved it. It's the nicest way to store anything on earth. The perfect temperature to start eating it, the perfect temperature to stay 6 to 8 months to a year. Talking about root vegetables, oil, apples, fruit, whatever you want to store, cabbage and so on. That's the ideal temperature. Fridge, they look at the enzymes and the bacteria, and that's why they said 4 or less. Anyhow, so those would be the oils that I personally recommend. So go for those oils. You have the parental oils there, let the body make the conversion. If you or anybody told you need EPA, DHA, increase those levels, go for the parental oils. Don't cheat and go for the derivatives. You can do it for the time being, but if you don't have the parental oils in the diet, that might not necessarily work for you so well.
Where does grapeseed oil fit in this?
Good question. So the question was, where does the grapeseed oil fit in this here? It should be right here. Should be right here if it's processed the proper way. You have the seeds, you cold press them, it should be right here, highly unsaturated. Because the high smoking point, they realize that they can heat it up. So in order for them to sell more and stay on a shelf to be able to sell it, it goes through processing. Right? So it's most likely going to have some trans fats in there, just because the high smoking point. Omega-6 is definitely damaged, and you remember from omega-6 we make the gamma-linoleic acid that is a modulator for the immune system. We need that. If that's damaged, immune system is going to be a little bit suppressed. You have allergies, what type of oil do you use? Oh, I'm using grapeseed because it's high smoking point. Maybe it's one of the problems. One of the problems, doesn't be the major one. Right? So you have to break down the fats to see what the issue is there as well. So ideally would be here is properly pressed, but it's most likely going to be into a saturated trans fat category. Right?
I want to ask, but for cooking, which oil is better, from this? Because salad,
None.
all that, or pasta?
None. You're talking about heat? None of this on this chart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why I gave you the hand up. Right? So because of the high heat, I still recommend the grapeseed oil because people cannot stay away from barbecue and I don't want them to use olive oil, which is going to be worse than grapeseed oil. Just to get an idea, yes. How much should you be having? If it's therapeutic, it's probably more than we conceive today. But if it's just a daily dose, I would probably say half of this glass. All right, throughout the day, and I'll show you some of the dishes that we can use those oils. All right, so 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons a day, just oils. Don't take them as a tablespoon, and if you do that with food, because it's food, it has to be with food. If you take it on an empty stomach, if you take the EPA and DHA capsule on an empty stomach, that small oil won't activate the digestive system entirely. Like all the juices, all the enzymes, you won't activate them enough to break down and absorb those oils. Have them with foods, so all the triggers are there to activate the enzymes to break down everything you put in. Food, do never consider it as a supplementation away from food. Doesn't make sense. You have to have it with food.
And so does this, when you're ingesting it, it has to be oil form? You can't just eat the avocado or eat the nuts?
Very good question. Should it be in a pumpkin seed, walnut seed, avocado, or it has to be in oil form? Let's take the avocado, because you gave the example and we talked about saturated fats. If you break the avocado into the 3 major categories, carbohydrates, fats, protein, what's the major one? Nope,
Oh, no? Is it more of a
it's carbohydrates.
Really?
So what's the body going to use? It's going to go crazy for the sugar, right? And it's going to say, yeah, some of the fats, protein I need. So the fat is going to be, right? Fat has to be oil form.
Okay. What percentage of the avocado is carbs? I eat one every day. It's fine. I love
I've seen various studies, but it's more than 50% carbohydrates.
Oh,
Crazy stuff. We're almost getting to the point where we're going to talk about what I gave to you today. And I also, anyway, let's do this. So why am I talking about this? Who am I to say those are the good oils and what's happening with us nowadays and so on? I grew up in Eastern Europe where we, every single year, twice a year, we would go and press oils in a town to make fresh cold pressed oils. Talking about pumpkin seeds and walnuts. This is how we survived, because we don't eat fish. Probably eat fish once a year, super mega deep fried, like the deepest fried ever. So there's absolutely no omega-3, omega-6 in the diet, except for those parental oils. This is how Eastern Europeans survive, and I know so many other cultures that they don't have other sources of EPA and DHA or omega-3, omega-6, right? Because you eat parental oils, you're fine. You can eat nuts and seeds. If the body makes the conversion, you absorb everything that you eat, it's fine, those are good enough, but ideally you go for the oil form. Just because this has issues, go directly, don't expect body's gonna make any type of extra step, all right? Do that extra step. So I grew up there where we were pressing, right? We were collecting all the seeds, we were drying them naturally, we go to the oil press. Same with the walnuts, we were cracking those nuts, right? So twice a year, one time when we're collecting all the crops, like the walnuts, pretty much October, November. We were doing one batch at that time, and then the other one sometimes around March, beginning of April, so about a month ago. And it really makes sense, because if you think about it, after a hard summer, you need to prepare your body to go into the winter, where there's less light, less conversion of vitamin C, less conversion of fat-soluble vitamins. So you put good fat in there for a time being, because you're going to consume that oil since you have it home. And you prepare the body for the winter. And in spring, when it's pretty much the reserve is done, you have another batch that you get in a body to become ready for the summer, when you're going to work a lot, right? So conversion of membrane and so on. It's very smartly done. So if you were to ask me about 25, 30 years back, what do I think about oils, what oils are good, I'll pretty much tell you the same thing without knowing the fancy words and the technology and the studies and so on. I would say they have to be cold pressed, they have to be this type of seeds and foods, because the other ones are not as good. So talking more about the cold pressed and how you should process those and what you should buy, I'll show you what affects and what damages those oils and why are they important. So first of all, those oils that we talked about, they have to have the right balance between saturated fats and unsaturated fats, or polyunsaturated, super unsaturated, whatever way you want to call them. We need the saturated fats. There's absolutely no way you have the saturated fats out of any type of food or oil. So regardless of what we do, saturated fats will always be there. You remember the membrane has one leg saturated, one leg unsaturated ideally. The saturated fat will never be out, will never disappear. That's always going to be there, right? Regardless of what we're going to eat. But we also need the vitamins. You remember the ones and the minerals, the coenzymes for the enzymes, right? The cofactors for the enzymes. We need those as well. So ideally, an oil will have all of this in one. And when you process that oil, it's supposed to have no exposure to light at all. This is why if you go to any food store, it's in opaque bottles, either brown or black, or it's a plastic bottle, right? They cannot be, because the light will damage them, right? It will induce the oxygen inside and will start damaging them. No exposure to oxygen at all. So the processing has to be extremely fast, no exposure to oxygen, and then when you package them, you actually spray with a little bit of nitrogen to take the oxygen out. You put the cap and it's done. This is why they still last on a shelf 6 months to a year, right? All the unsaturated fats. Yes?
What about the butters?
I couldn't hear, sorry.
What about the butters, like pumpkin butter, almond butter?
What about the butters? I need a little bit more.
Well, like, is it
Whether are good or no, yes.
different between like being raw nut and oils? Are kind of different between like how your body?
No, to me that's a protein source.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so nut butters, from my perspective, are a protein source, nothing to do with the actual fats. You will get some out of it, but because you open that jar 20 times, they get a little bit damaged, the oils, right? So consider it as a protein source, all right? And then the other thing that damages those is heat. This is why we specifically call them cold-pressed oils. So now, why I talk about all this and why did I give you some samples and why it's all the craziness? I re-ramped those slides to get ready for today. I had them done for another presentation, but I re-ramped them yesterday until late. And I woke up early in the morning to press oil. I have oil press. I do press this because I was inspired by my family growing up. And since we moved to Canada, I purchased an oil press. I'm pressing my own oils. And I go from walnuts to pumpkin seed to sesame to hemp to whatever the crazy seeds I found. And I press and we have them home. I've been asked here, why don't you bring some oils? I had when I was in IGN. I shared with some of the colleagues there. It doesn't make financial sense for me to start a business on oils. And I look at many companies doing it, they cut corners. If I were to expose some of them, you probably won't buy anything. Like me, you buy your own press and then you do your own stuff. Because it's gonna be one of this is where they will cheat, right? Either they apply high heat to have a high yield of oil, they keep it for filtration, exposed to oxygen much more, and as I'll share to you a bottle of pumpkin soy you'll see, or the exposure to light, right? That's less likely to happen. It won't give you more money by doing that, but those two will definitely increase your value, right? So they cut corners somewhere. It doesn't necessarily mean that the whole oil is damaged, but it's definitely more than a fresh one than you actually have a chance to taste today. Yes?
Where do you get it? Is it very costly?
Like the big
I spent 8,500 plus the transport. So it's not that expensive. It's nothing. Pocket change. For me, it's 2 cars. I don't spend more than $5,000 for a car. To me, it's just stupid to spend more than $5,000 for a car. It does exactly the same thing. Yeah, there's a hand crank version as well. That's probably a couple $100.
Still a couple hundred?
Be like, see my right hand? Look at this. Not only eating oils, but I'm making them. So yes, it's possible. And you also have the motorized version. It looks like a juicer. You have one of those juicer with an auger, so you can use that as well. Obviously, it's not going to be a high quantity, but how much you need? You need 200 grams a week, right? 200 milliliters a week, and it's good enough. And you make your own. It's fresh. You know the source. Like it's all crazy. It's all there. It's fresh.
What do you see how when you have juice, you have the juice and then you have the
Yes.
when you make oil and you get the
When you milk the seeds, what do you end up with?
the oil, what do you do with the
I give it to you. So the question was, what do I do with the byproduct of oil pressing? Right. So we got right there where we had the questions in the beginning. So I pressed pumpkin seed oil today for you. I want you to see how it looks, how it smells, how it tastes, so you understand why companies, in order to sell, have to cut some corners.
So this is just pumpkin?
So that is just pumpkin in there. Byproduct is a pumpkin powder. It's about 60% protein, just pumpkin, nothing else in there. And it's food. So what you do with this, of course. So what you do with this, and ends up answering again to your question, should I have the pumpkin seeds or should I have the oil and the powder separate? They will be used for different functions. Oil will get right to the conversion, will get absorbed right away. This powder, and this is the crazy part about the pumpkin seed, high levels of zinc, high levels of lecithin in there. Personally, I use it when I give it to clients for a different purpose. If you have trouble sleeping, and if you put this powder on a high glycemic fruit, you can do even an apple. It doesn't have to be super high glycemic food, but even an apple, a pear, a pineapple, papaya, whatever comes to your mind, sprinkle on that fruit, have 3-4 bites a night, 15 minutes before you go to sleep. I'll put you to sleep right away. It works like a charm. I love it. It's one of the reasons and one of the ways I use it with clients, all right, for that. If it doesn't work, it means that your system doesn't work. Somewhere between those phases will break down, you have some issues, and then we're talking about a different approach. But if the body doesn't have the right nutrients, which this provides to make what it needs, melatonin, that's what we need. Because it has high level of tryptophan, and then the body makes melatonin to put you to sleep at night from tryptophan. I can talk about tryptophan for an hour. That's what I love it. But this is what it does and what it works. So enjoy the powder. You have about 20 grams there. You can use it maybe 2 times. But try it. See the smell. See the taste. You should be able to find it for sale in some of the stores sometimes. Highly oxidizable, so it's hard to keep. This is why companies tend not to, or they do some other stuff with it. They press it way too hard, it becomes like this table. So what they do, they send it to like animal farms, and they use it as a feed. I want to eat that. Why is the animal eating it? And then I eat the pesticides or the hormones from the animal.
I just bought melatonin actually, and it says on the bottle not to have it more than a month. So can you consume this?
Oh yeah.
More than
Food.
Yeah.
If you won't take that pathway because it doesn't need to, it's going to get converted somewhere else. Tryptophan we're going to use for so many other functions in the body as amino acid. Doesn't have to go to the pathway of melatonin. You need it because you're going to go to sleep. It has it. It's going to go that pathway.
I actually researched it, and I had some trouble sleeping, and I started eating deficiencies, and I just
Yep, tryptophan. So when you do the pumpkin seeds, you have the oil. You have to convert that as well. This, it's right there. This is why I love them separated.
Where do you get the pumpkin seeds?
This batch I got from Goodness Me. So this is what I got. I didn't press a lot because I didn't want to spend the whole day pressing oil. Open the bottle, smell it. I have spoons if you like to try. Stop by here and try it. If I give the spoon, it's going to be kind of messy to go around, but I'll leave it on the table. And please have a spoon and taste it. You need to taste to see and understand and have the palate recalibrated to a fresh pressed cold pressed oil. Otherwise,
You did it this morning.
it's 6 hour old. This is the freshest oil you ever taste in your
So
life.
you have taken the oil and this is the powder afterwards. You've
Correct.
Taken,
Correct.
but still this is good to put it, you are saying at night you put it on the fruit and eat.
Yes.
You may be getting to this. So I don't have $8,000 to buy my old school press. Can you recommend certain brands that you think are better than other ones? Like at Goodness Me, for example, or some or
I'm trying whether I should be nice or should be nasty. This is why I bought my own press.
Right.
You do find good ones. For the pumpkin seed, the one that I love the most. Walnut, I couldn't find one that's actually properly done. But pumpkin seed, I think it's Omega Nutrition. I hope I'm making it right. It's in a black whatever, the plastic bottle
Yeah.
with the pumpkins on it.
Okay. The company is Omega.
I think it's called Omega Nutrition.
Omega Nutrition.
And the other one was, other oils. Flaxseed oil doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter who presses it. With flaxseed oil, you have a high yield. The only problem would be the oxygen among the three. So you don't need to heat up so much because you have a high yield, you're gonna make your money. But this is the only problem because it's highly unsaturated. Any type of exposure to oxygen, we're gonna start a chain reaction of breaking that down. So then you open the bottle 10 times and expose to oxygen. By the time you finish that bottle, it's gonna be pretty much a damaged oil. Smell it if you have, and I should have bring one that's actually oxidized so you can see the difference. But it's probably better just to get calibrated to a good one.
When you say oxidized, is that the same term as rancid?
Yes. Right, so when it gets rancid, that's what's happening with the oil, right? And you had somebody else had a question. Yes.
I was wondering if we could take a mini break and just chat
If we take a minute break, I think I have 2 more slides. I'll let this pass through, open up and smell it, and then I'll have the spoons here and kind of mingle and taste. Let me get through this, and then we'll go there. Let's start here. So first thing, you see how thick it is, and it's not see-through, it's not clear. That needs filtration. That's more exposure to oxygen, right? Just so you understand what goes through my mind when I look at an oil. I break it down to millions of pieces, and then I buy my own press. So it doesn't mean that it's bad, but it's not as pure as something like this, right? So if I can have this, why not go for the crazy one? It doesn't make financial sense to go in a business on this so far. You can open and can smell and see.
Maybe.
You can.
Okay, I got it.
Yes, there was another question.
Where can I buy like my own press? Is it something that's like very heavy or easy, or is it an expensive thing, or
If you say
cold press?
cold press, oil press, all this kind of stuff, it'll come up.
So it's something common that can be like easily purchased. Not like
Yeah, I don't think there's any manufacturing in Canada, so you won't, right? US, and this is what I bought mine from New Jersey. Lots of them in Europe. This is what you're gonna have, I think it's Piteba called, the hand cracking one. Piteba, I hope I'm not mistaken. So you can do something like that, or you can look at the Omega Juicer. I think they have a version of the oil press, the attachment. You can just attach it there, so you can use that as well.
Going back a bit, you were saying that you take the oil with food. So if you're wondering what food you recommend, like if the avocado is too high carb, that's what you're getting.
Comes right up.
All right.
It's not much, but it gives you the whole palette of foods that you can apply those oils to. All right, so because I brought you the pumpkin seed oil, we'll break it down from the same perspective, right? 60% saturated, so I said we need to saturate it, and it's about 60%, 40% polyunsaturated, out of which the parental oils, omega-6 to omega-3, it's a ratio of 5:1. And this is what I said, I prefer this ratio, I love it for the lifetime consumption, solely based on the fact that, let's call it my people, so Eastern Europeans survive on this, because there's no other source of, no other significant source of parental oils, right? There's no fish there or anything else. So I love this ratio, and it's a good way of doing it. But it also contains vitamin E, which is an antioxidant, B vitamins. You remember the coenzymes, B6, B3 that it needs for the conversion. So you already have everything you need there to make the conversion. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Calcium, magnesium, zinc, and other antioxidants, mineral. This is why they recommend pumpkin seed for the prostate, for the men, because the high level of zinc. Manganese, and it goes on and on and on. So antioxidants, selenium, zinc, vitamin E, and copper. All of those act as antioxidants. This is why the oil will last longer and not become as oxidized as flaxseed oil, for instance. And I do remember my grandma keeping those, as I told you, in a cold storage from like October till March. We still have a bottle or two of oil. You open up and it's nice and fresh because it has antioxidants. Try to do that with flaxseed oil. It does not contain all the other nutrients. Personally, I never recommend flaxseed oil for clients just because of high level of exposure and oxygenation. Yes, question.
Once you press the pumpkin seed oil, how long can it last in there before it's bad?
You mean in a bottle the way it is?
Yeah, how long can you use it for?
Specifically, so the question was how long would the pumpkin seed oil stay in a bottle without getting rancid, right? And I just said, I used to grow up with this oil staying in a cold storage up to about 6 months. So it's possible to stay that long, pumpkin seed oil specifically, right? Do not put them, and you can put them in the fridge, it will stay easily that long, right? Now it depends. If you have a drop every single day and you open the bottle and take it out of the fridge every single day for a drop, and I do remember once we opened a bottle, it was coming inside the house and we were going through the bottle. It's about a half a liter bottle, those old-style beer bottles in Europe. That's what they were cleaning and using. So it's like, oh, I'm going to give it to the neighbor, I'm going to give it to my daughter, my this, right? So you kind of share, and you go to the bottle within a matter of a few days once you open it, right? So this is what I said. You keep it in the fridge, but you open it every single day, right, for like 3 months. Probably going to get oxidized much faster than you think, right?
How would you know that it has oxidized?
If you haven't smelled the rancid oil, my recommendation is to buy flaxseed, leave it out for a night, smell it or taste it in the morning. After that, you will never ever forget how rancid oil tastes or smells. And it's good because sometimes you buy an oil, I heard, you open a bottle and it smells rancid, fresh. So you have to dump it. My recommendation, dump it. Don't even look at the money or anything you spend for it because it's more damaging than good. You had another question? Sorry, you had another question? All right. Do you like the smell?
About flaxseed not having more than 2 tablespoons, about this, it's okay to have more than...
See that difference?
Yeah.
Right? I had a little bit more, because I had another bottle like this, so I had a little bit more in the morning after I pressed it fresh. Oh, no. The way I eat it, we make our own bread. Oh. All right? We buy the flour from Europe. I buy it from Starsky. It has to come from Europe. It's a different type of grain in there. There's a different talk on that. So we make our own bread. And what I do, I put this in a plate, I add some salt, and I dip it, and that's how I eat.
So it could be
It's the only thing I had in a breakfast. It's almost 3 o'clock. I don't feel hungry. Keeps me going, gives me all energy, and so on.
So you buy it from Starseed?
Starsky. You know the store, the supermarket Starsky on Dundas?
Starsky.
Mm-hmm. It's a Polish store. That's where I buy the flour. It has to come from either Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, whatever it is from Eastern Europe, because I know the seed is good there and the flour is going to be fantastic. And the bread, it gives me no issues. If I go to a party and I eat a burger with the bun, boy, oh boy. Yes, questions?
I was just going to ask, you said you dip your bread, so would you say that's a 1/4 cup serving of oil?
Pretty much.
Okay.
That's me. I go crazy on stuff, even with chocolate, right? If I go for the chocolate, I go with 2 bars and done. I'm done for 6 months. Don't do it the same way. It works for me.
When you make the bread, do you use an electric bread maker, or does that kill nutrients? Oh,
like the whole thing, just dump the stuff and get the bread at the end style?
Yeah.
No, I use just a mixer, and then by hand mold it. And, yeah, it takes about 3.5 hours, the whole process. Because I use fresh yeast. So by the time that grows, and then you make the bread, you let it rise for the first time, you mix it again, you put it with the humidifier in the oven, about 170 temperature, I let it raise the second time, and then I mold it and bake it. So altogether about 3.5 hours. But we use about 2 breads a week, small batch. Example of French toast. My daughter loves French toast. Yes, there was another question.
I know that sometimes they have ancient yeast where they've had it for centuries and they had it through their family generations and
Okay.
have the special yeast. Is it a special yeast?
So the question is, what type of yeast do I use? And if I use the fresh one, what type is it? Just as a side note, cholesterol-free yeast, I'm using cholesterol-free yeast and fat-free yeast. Wait a minute, it's not supposed to be there, exactly. Just because we're talking about fats, right? And we kind of derived. It's fresh. I don't know where it's coming from. I think they buy it in the large batches against Starsky, and they repackage it because they have their own label. It's fresh. You smell it. It's all good. Even if it dries up, it's fine. Yeast is fine. If you don't activate it, if you don't give it enough temperature, enzymes, moisture, and so on, it won't get activated. It's fine. It doesn't go bad. Yeah. So the reason I said it's cholesterol-free and it's fat-free yeast is because, and this is another myth out there, right? Oh, I'm buying this oil because it's cholesterol-free. And that oil happens to be, let's say, canola oil. And it's a big label, cholesterol-free. Well, guess what? Canola does not contain cholesterol to begin with. So why do you advertise it so much? It's just crazy. But people buy because the doctor said low cholesterol. Right, it goes for that. Just very quick on, right? Because it was the question, where do you use those oil and what do you do with them, right? What foods do you think we can use those in? Salad. Very fancy dish, but I love it. Slice of cucumber, paprika, a little bit of pumpkin seed oil, and if you want to use cottage cheese, if not, you can make an alternative with the cashew cheese. Just nice and awesome. And because of the fat level, you don't have to eat so much. You get the fresh enzymes from the cucumber, a little protein from the cheese. It's all there.
Is that turmeric?
No, I use paprika. It can be anything you like.
Oh, the yellow spray.
Exactly.
Is that not turmeric around this?
This specific is paprika, but you can use anything you like. Paprika.
Oh, paprika.
Paprika.
Sorry.
All right, so salad, yes. Fish, very nice and fancy dinner. Once again, this gives you DHA and EPA, but you still need the other derivatives. So why not drizzle the oil on top of this? Really make it a complete meal.
After it's cooked.
Once you plate it, the temperature is less than 45 degrees. You plate it, leave it on the table, and when you sit down, you start drizzling. That temperature is less than 45, which will start damaging. If it's higher than 45, it will start damaging the oil. At that temperature, it won't damage the oil. Because once you plate it, you pretty much can taste it. If it's more than 45, you won't be able to taste it. You'll burn yourself. You got my point? So it's not a problem with the temperature.
When you
There was a
put
question.
the fish in the oven, can you put olive oil on the top and put it, or maybe when you bake it and then you can put it?
Olive oil, never apply heat to olive oil. Use one of those when you apply heat. Yeah, don't apply heat to olive oil. Personally, fish has so much fat in it, you don't need the extra kickstart.
If the salmon is farmed, is that bad?
It's a whole other topic.
Pretty much, but yeah. And I know when we say fish, and this is what I get in the clinic a lot, like, do you eat fish? Yeah, I have a lot of salmon. The level of good fats in the salmon is so small, it's almost insignificant. So you need to go with the cold water fish, small fish, sardine, sauri, mackerel, small tuna, all those fish that you actually put in a plate as a whole, not just a steak, which looks nice and is palatable. Right? 98% protein, a little bit of fat, right? You won't survive just on that, especially if you super cook it or heavy duty cook it, right? You damage the oil and so on.
So you are saying sardine or other fish are better than salmon, right? Because more fat content in that?
Yes.
Small one?
Yes.
Small.
It's mostly protein.
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite is sauri. It's called sauri.
Can you say?
And sauri.
From the ocean?
That is leaves the most oil in a plate that I've ever seen in any type of fish. Like at the end, I have to do the same thing I do with this. Why not? There's like 3 capsules of fish oil in there on a plate. Why not go and eat it? Has the most oil that I've ever seen in any type of fish. And we have sort of an enclosed cooking grill over the gas fire, right? So it has a hole in here, it has a grill in the middle, and it's completely covered. So the air kind of goes this way and has some aerators at the bottom, and that's how we cook it, right? So it's not high temperature, but it's enough to cook the whole thing. Doesn't burn it, doesn't break it, doesn't smell burn, doesn't smell at all a fish inside the house. So that's how I like this. Sometimes we do small tuna, mackerel, and so on. Depends if they are fresh or not. But I love those when it comes to oils and fish and DHA and what you need to get for the brain, right? But for the daily basis, cold press. Do never ever skip a day without cold pressed oils.
This fish you can buy anywhere like that, or a particular place?
Burhamthorpe, you go down, any of the Chinese stores would carry it,
Oh.
of the supermarkets. That's the easiest way. You can find it somewhere else as well, but that's the easiest way. Creamy soups. Pumpkin soup with pumpkin seed oil. But you can do any other type of soup, and you can sprinkle any type of oil in there, right? It will mix nicely, and you have high-level carbohydrates with a little fat and a protein that's there, right? Palatable, very easy to incorporate. And I know everybody was looking at the D, letter D there. It's possible. So here is an avocado ice cream. I made it with dairy, okay. but you can find alternative, right? And I did the pumpkin seed oil because it goes with savory or sweet. You get a chance to taste it and think about it from both perspectives. It goes with, same with walnut. Actually, walnut goes majority with the sweet dishes, less with the savory ones. And then the seeds are actually, they look like pumpkin seeds, but they're not. I found watermelon seeds, and I added into this. Watermelon seeds are used in cosmetic industries a lot for the skin, facials, and all that stuff. Extremely good. So if they're good for them, why not? It's good for me as well. When I taste them, they're actually awesome, and I add it to this ice cream. It's just so it works, right? So what dishes can you use it? Endless. Just be creative. Taste it. Hemp seed oil is not as, doesn't have such a variety of dishes that you can use on, just because it's extremely potent. It has a green taste to me. It's very, very, very nutty and strong. Pumpkin seed oil, walnut's actually the most versatile. It's very, very smooth. Flaxseed oil, have to be creative. I personally don't use. All right. I have other options and I don't go for that. But if you were to use flaxseed oil, buy the smallest bottle you can find. If you have a friend you want to share with, share that bottle and buy every single week so it's as fresh as you can once you open it. All right. Go ahead, another question.
Watermelon seeds. I heard that papaya seeds, can you oil those? And I heard that they're for parasites.
No and yes. The answer would be no and yes. So the papaya seeds, can we press the papaya seeds? No, they're too dry to get any oil out of it. So it wouldn't work. But what I do, I dry them up. You know how they have a membrane, water membrane around them? I put them between 2 paper towels and I press them down. So I break that membrane and I leave them on a paper towel for about 3-4 days until everything is dry. And then I use those seeds in a pepper meal, and that's how you use it. And you just spice up every single meal that you want. And they are strongly and highly anti-parasitic. Yep.
This is bitter. This is anti-parasitic.
Tastes a little bit different than pepper. I'm okay, give me anything. So yeah, those are fine. It takes that long, yeah. It takes that long to dry. Because if you try to transfer from that paper towel, unless you do it one by one, it's very difficult. They stick to that paper towel. So you have to use the same wet paper towel to leave it.
Okay, you rub them and then
Yeah, and you just leave it there to dry.
Could you put them in a dehydrator as well?
Good idea, I haven't tried. I tried so many things on the dehydrator, I didn't try that. I think it's just, I'm fine waiting 4 days, I think. I never thought about it. Maybe you still want to break the cell, break that water molecule around it.
Break it, okay.
Right, because it will take a while for that to burst, to release the water, and then actually have the seed. Because actually the seed is dry, it's just the moisture that surrounds it, right? So you're pretty much able to have this on everything except one thing. Yeah, nobody wants that. Crazy thought. One way of getting oil out of your shirt would be to leave it in the sun for a few hours. And then you dry rub it and it's coming off. I tried it, and as any natural way of approaching things, it's not the 100% proof, but it goes more than 50%. Right? So if it's not a very deep or very heavy-duty stain, you can do that. Summer comes along, leave it out for a few hours, and then scrape it off. All right, and I think we're off.